Hey everyone, it's Carissa Wiley at sprinkledwithglitter.com. Thanks for joining me today. Today's video tutorial was previously shared on the Pinkfresh Studio YouTube channel, but I thought you would enjoy seeing it here as well. Today I am sharing this beautiful fall-themed card project, and I am going to show you how to warm up your colors for fall. I'll be featuring the new Always Smiling stamps, coordinating stencils, and dies, but keep in mind that this is also available in a press plate. And I'll also be featuring the new Dotted Fancy Frames die set. I absolutely love this because each of these shapes has an outer and an inner die, which allows you to either create a solid shape or a frame with these dies. Now I'm going to start out with the Always Smiling stamp set, and I'm removing the stamp from the backer sheet. I'm going to be using that large floral branch image, and I'm going to place some white cardstock in my Misty stamping tool, line up my stamp, pick it up with the lid of my Misty, and then I'm going to ink it up using espresso. Now, using a dark brown ink for your outline can really warm up your finished image. And if you haven't tried this, I encourage you to try this, especially during the fall. I just think it makes a really beautiful outline color for your stamped images. I stamped it once and I used my stamp press tool to apply even pressure over the entire area, and I decided I wanted that color to be a little more intense, and so I'm re-inking my stamp without moving the stamp or the paper and pressing the stamp into the exact same spot again, once again using that stamp press tool to make sure I get even pressure over the entire area of the stamp. I trimmed that down and I brought in my 9x12 grip mat to hold my cardstock in place while I do my stenciling. And I'm starting with stencil number 1. I'm going to be going in order with these stencils, and I'm starting with this persimmon color. Now, my goal for this color is not to cover all of the areas in their entirety with a dark layer of ink. I really want the darkest shade of ink to be towards the centers or the base of the petals on these flowers, and I want to kind of fade it out as it gets to kind of the end of the petal. So I'm just making sure that I come in with this 1/2-inch blending brush because that's going to give me a little more control over where I put my ink, and I'm just blending heavier towards the center and allowing that color to kind of fade out as I do my blending. Now, the reason is that I want to bring in another color, and I kind of want to leave not some completely white areas for that next color, but at least some lighter areas where I can then blend the two colors together. So once I'm done blending with the persimmon color, I'm going to wipe off the entire area of the stencil because I don't want to pick up any of that orange and bring it into the areas where I'm going to blend this coral reef ink. So I'm bringing in the coral reef kind of towards the tips of those petals, allowing the pink and the orange to kind of blend together. This is just to give it a little variation, not necessarily to warm it up because persimmon is already a warm color. But we're going to talk about warming up this coral reef ink in the next stencil layer that we do. Now, when I'm finished with the coral reef, I'm going to go ahead and grab my dry cloth and wipe over the entire area of the stencil. I like to get a lot of color off of my stencil before I pull it up because I feel like, number one, I don't make as big of a mess, and especially when I'm using foiled images, I feel like this keeps it from kind of wiping off into the surrounding area. So now I'm placing stencil number 2, and for this stencil, I'm going to start with coral reef ink. So there's a few florals here that will be coral, but I didn't want them to be so bright pink since I really wanted this card to have a fall feel or vibe. So I'm just starting out by blending this again with the heavier coral reef towards the base of the petals or the flowers. And then I am going to wipe down my stencil again, and I'm going to grab dough ink. And I'm going to blend this kind of the darkest at the base of the petals again, and then kind of blend it out softly over that coral reef ink to kind of bring a little more warmth to these images. It's kind of hard to see the effect of this dough ink over the coral reef. Remember, the goal is not to overtake the coral reef entirely, it's to warm it up. Now, Pinkfresh Studio has some great brown inks that are perfect for warming up colors for fall. So if you have a favorite color, using something like Warm Buff or Dough is great to kind of softly blend over your favorite colors to give them a little extra warmth for fall. Now you're going to see this beautiful color that this creates, this beautiful effect as I lift off the second stencil. And then we're going to move into stencil number 3. Now stencil number 3 are the flower centers. And for this, I'm just going to bring in espresso again. I had a feeling at this point that I would probably cover the centers with some sort of jewels or some sort of special effect. I didn't really feel the need to bring in another color, but I did want the centers of these florals to be a nice dark color. So I've blended quickly over those centers and I forgot one, so I went back and did it, and then I wiped down my stencil. I'll remove this third stencil and then I will place stencil number 4, and those are going to be my leaves. Once I have stencil number 4 in place, I'm going to bring in olive ink. Now, olive is one of my favorite greens from Pinkfresh Studio, but I want it to be a little bit deeper and a little bit richer, so I am focusing on bringing a lot of color again towards the base of the leaf and allowing it to kind of blend out, but I still need color at the tips. I don't want it to be completely white. So I'm just kind of layering up the ink towards the base and blending out towards the tip. And once I have all the leaves blended, then I'm going to work on kind of the buds or berries up towards the top of the stencil. So the stencil has kind of the main area of the leaves as well as a few kind of berries on it. And for those, I really wanted to bring in another warm color. And so for that, I am going to wipe down my stencil and bring in sweet mustard. Now, sweet mustard is definitely the darkest of the yellows in the Pinkfresh Studio color family, but sometimes for me, it still feels a little too bright and a little too happy, and I like to kind of tap it back a little bit using one of these brown inks. For this, I'm just going to blend the little berries or buds really quickly with the sweet mustard. And then I'm going to bring in the brush that I used with the espresso flower centers. And without re-inking, I'm going to go over those areas. So I'm going to give it just a light kiss of that espresso to kind of warm those up, kind of make them a little moodier and make them feel a little more fall. So you can see I just grabbed that brush. It doesn't have a ton of ink on it. And I just quickly blended over that area. From there, we'll move into our 5th and final stencil, and this includes the branch, some detail layers on the leaves, as well as a few more berries. So I'm going to start with the branch first, and the ironic thing about this is that I didn't realize I would be cutting off the branch later, so just humor me here. I'm going to add my espresso ink to the branch, and then I'm also going to blend the detail areas of these leaves with espresso ink. Again, allowing the concentration of ink to be towards the base of the leaves and then kind of blending out. I don't want this to look like just brown on top of the green. I want those colors to meld together. So I'm being careful not to cover the entire area with a solid layer of ink. Now, once I get all of the espresso areas blended, I'm going to wipe down my stencil again, and I'm going to come in to the leftover little pieces. And once again, I'm going to use coral reef. So there's just a few small open areas towards the top and outer areas of this stencil. I'll go over it with coral reef first. And then once again, I'm going to knock that back and warm it up by using that espresso brush without re-inking. This step doesn't take long at all because I'm not covering large areas. You can see I'm even blending off some of that espresso ink to make sure it really doesn't overtake the coral reef. I still want it to be pink. I just don't want it to be bright pink. Once I've blended over all of the coral reef areas, I can pull off my stencil, and now it's ready to remove from the grip mat. So I'm going to pick the grip mat up off my work surface and roll it away from my cardstock to keep my cardstock from warping or curling. Now it's time to do our die cutting. So I'm starting out with the coordinating Always Smiling die, and I'm placing it around that image there. You can see I'm using my Anna Griffin Impress machine. Once I have that in place, I will run this through my die cut machine. And one of the things I love about this Always Smiling die set is that it creates kind of some open areas within the florals as well, so you don't have a lot of excess white. Now I'm taking the medium shape of this dotted Fancy Frames die set, and I'm die cutting it from some kind of rich green cardstock. And once I have that done, then I'm going to take the inner shape and I'm going to nest the two shapes together to die cut some glitter cardstock. So I have some of the Essentials glitter cardstock from Pink Fresh Studio. I believe this color is champagne, and I'm nesting both of those dies together, and I'm going to die cut with both dies at once. So instead of giving the solid shape like I have on the green layer over there, this is going to give me a beautiful, delicate shaped glitter frame that I'm going to then adhere over the top of that shape to add just a really beautiful sparkle. I love this champagne colored glitter with the color palette that I've chosen, and so I think it's a really beautiful sparkly accent. Next up, I have one of the sentiments from the Always Smiling stamp set. I'm going to ink that up in some espresso ink and stamp it onto the scrap of this piece of cardstock that I used for my branch. And then once again, I will use the coordinating die to die cut this out. And this is a really delicate sentiment. And when I placed it on top of my floral frame or my floral die cut here, I really felt like it was kind of getting lost. So we'll remedy that here in just a moment. Now this floral branch looks really beautiful kind of hanging off of this shape, but I decided I wanted it to only hang off kind of in that lower left corner. So I'm taking the larger die from that medium set. It's the same die that I used to cut that solid green layer over there. So it's the group of medium size, and I'm positioning my branch where it's going to cut everything except for that lower left-hand corner. I left that hanging out of the die. This gives me the perfect shape and helps me line it up on that solid green shape. So once I have it figured out, I'm going to go ahead and add some liquid glue just to the back right side of this floral image, and I'll place it onto that dark green layer. Now this was really easy to do because there's that little point to the right hand side, and once you get that nestled in to the other solid layer die cut, then it just kind of locks into place perfectly. Now I can take some liquid glue, apply it to the back of my glitter cardstock frame, and I have to kind of lift up the lower left-hand edge that's going to overhang this frame to slide the frame underneath and line it up with the edges of that solid green piece. So once I have the liquid glue, once I have it placed, I'm going to just use my fingers to make sure all of the edges line up. Liquid glue is really great for this step because it allows you to kind of slide things into place. Now here's where I'm going to remedy that sentiment kind of getting a little lost. I die cut some vellum using the basic banners die. I love this. It does have sentiment dies that coordinate, but I love just using it for layers under die cut sentiments. It's so perfect. You could die cut these banners from glitter cardstock. Here I've done it from vellum. I've also used it on colored cardstock. I just think it's a nice little accent. And then I'm going to use some liquid glue to adhere my sentiment onto that banner shape. Once I have that in place, I'm going to flip it over and I'm going to add a couple really narrow strips of foam adhesive to the back of the banner, just where that white die cut sentiment will cover or disguise my foam adhesive. Then I removed the backer to the foam adhesive and I placed it over my branch here. I did use kind of a slight angle on that. I just thought it really was beautiful like that. And to bring my floral area a little dimension, you can see that I just kind of curled some of those floral pieces up. Now I used the dotted fancy frames to die cut that ivory piece there from some off-white cardstock. And I have some twine and I'm just tying it towards the bottom of this green shape that I've created with all the beautiful florals. I'll just kind of tighten up that bow there. You can see I've positioned it over to kind of the lower left-hand side, and I can trim off those tails a little bit later, but I do like to leave my tails kind of long. I just think it gives it a more whimsical and free feeling on your card. Now I'm taking this shape here, which is my focal point, and I'm nestling it right onto that ivory piece that I've die cut using those dotted fancy frames. I am using some foam adhesive for this, and then I'm going to trim a piece of cardstock down to 4 inches by 5¼ inches. And I'm going to layer the frames that I just created onto this solid piece of cardstock. So I'm just trimming this down. I'm using some foam adhesive to adhere this whole card front onto this cardstock layer. And then I'll take this entire thing and adhere it onto an A2 size white card base using some tape runner adhesive. So there's no foam dimension behind that kind of pastel blushy colored cardstock at the back. So there you have my tips and tricks for warming up your ink colors for fall. I really hope you enjoyed this card project, and I hope you enjoyed this video tutorial. If you did, be sure to give this video a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notifications here on YouTube so you don't miss any of the paper crafting and card making video tutorials shared here. As always, I will include links to the featured products used in this project in the YouTube description below, so if you're looking for something in particular, be sure you check there. Thanks so much for stopping by and hanging out with me today, and until next time, I hope you have a fabulous day. Hey, thanks for sticking around to the very end. You know, if you've made it this far, you are one of my favorites. To subscribe to my channel, go ahead and click the button on the left side of the screen, and here's a couple more video tutorials I thought you might enjoy.